let's go in alphabetical order here. I'd like to introduce Amanda Jordan first, not to be confused with Amanda Johnson, who is also on the call today. But Amanda has been rocking the SEO world since 2011, specializing in local, legal, and enterprise SEO. She's passionate about solving complex client problems and is always up for a challenge. When she's not diving into digital strategy, Amanda enjoys playing with her dogs and showing her son who's boss in Mario Kart, which is pretty awesome. And Bernard, if you want to drop her follow links as well, just like again in the chat so everyone has them. And then Melissa Popp, who's also here with us today, and they're colleagues. So they work together, which is awesome. She is RicketyRoo's content strategy director, and she works with clients directly to create engaging and authoritative content that dominates local search results. And every client has a story, especially small and medium businesses. Melissa takes those stories and creates content that improves experience optimization and increases conversion goals. So we are honored to have you both here today. Bernard and I were chatting before this. We are not local SEO specialists, but we know a lot of our clients are. And we love that both of you as experts are here today to kind of give us really wise and smart insights. So today, here's what a content teardown is. Melissa and Amanda are going to go through a couple of sites that were audience submitted and give like their top level overview, what's going well, what needs work, and give their professional feedback. This is also an excellent session to get your very specific SEO tactical questions answered. So again, feel free to drop them in. But before we jump into the sites that were submitted, I have a few questions for them both. So before we get started, first question, how would you define local SEO and SEO for multi-location businesses, and how are they the same and how are they different?
Yeah, I'll go first. So how they're the same first, they're the same because geography is a factor. And really the biggest difference is scalability and information architecture and figuring out how to get all the right pieces to fit together for a much larger site. Those are really the biggest differences. As far as what needs to be done for local SEO versus SEO for multiple businesses with multiple locations, it's pretty much the same thing. It's just the scale of it is so much larger when you have multiple locations, and the planning and strategy behind it is a little bit different because there's so many different factors that come into play that may not actually come into play when you only have one or two locations. Because you may have questions when you have multiple locations, you may have questions about things like, are these two locations too close to each other? Are they competing for the same market? Or are these locations actually like, which location is outperforming the other? What are things that are impacting us so that this location is doing so well, while this other location who has the exact same SEO strategy isn't performing as well? What's going on locally and understanding those local markets? There's a lot more of that, I think, for multi-location large businesses than there are for smaller businesses, because it's much more straightforward since you're only competing in a limited number of markets.
Yeah, that makes sense. Anything to add there, Melissa?
Definitely on the content side, Amanda said it multiple times, this is about scalability. A lot of your strategy, your tactics are going to work the same, but it's the scale at which you deploy them. And on the content side, I like to look at the difference between your run-of-the-mill local SEO and multi-location, as you're essentially creating a content strategy for each location within that multi-location business. You have to look at what regional, neighborhood, suburban content is going to resonate with potential communities. Even your internal linking strategies of that content is going to be much different than at scale or through a single location business. And so I like to look at it, it's like little microcosms and ecosystems within on the content strategy side. And then you take that and you rinse and repeat that scalability for a multi-location business.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, awesome. Next question before we get started. So we've all experienced a lot of changes in SEO and content marketing this year, or at least we felt like we have. So, how has Google's approach to local or multi-location search changed in 2024? And do you have any initial thoughts before we dig into these sites, like on how businesses can adapt to those changes?
Yeah, I can start with that. I think on the content side, more so than necessarily impact solely being on local or multi-location, it really is overall, going back to the idea of the helpful content update. Whether you're working on an enterprise site, e-commerce site, multi-location, single business, the importance of quality content has, I don't want to say changed because it's always been there, but I think it's been highlighted more than ever. And I don't think that approach changes regardless of what type of website you're working on, niche, even location. I think the tenets of quality content stay the same and are just consistently being reinforced between helpful content updates, the wild, insane movement and de-indexings we're starting to see with core algorithm updates. And then along with, what we could data mine and learn and take from the Google leaks as well. I think we're just seeing a continued reinforcement of what those of us in content have always known, and that's the power and importance of it. So I don't think that changes local versus anything else.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I would add that from a perspective of looking at SEO as a whole, I think people have discounted the value of branding and overall marketing and considering your entire marketing ecosystem as a whole for too long, especially SEOs. And we're now seeing that that is becoming even more important because of the rise of things like AI, because the more visibility you have online in general, the better off you are. The more brand awareness there is for your company in general, the better off you are. So thinking about SEO as a silo, I think it's going to start really having a negative impact on overall marketing, but also in just getting SEO results from SEO. And thinking more holistically about your marketing approach is going to be the way to go in the upcoming months and years as we get used to there being multiple ways for people to search.
Man, I'm glad I asked those questions because those were some good answers.
That's a whole other webinar we could be having.
I know, right? We'll have to have you back. We'll have to just keep talking. Okay, so let's dig in to the websites that were submitted. So I believe Amanda or Melissa are going to share their screen, and then we will just, okay, here we go. Y'all ready? My sleeves are rolled up, but I'm not doing any of this work. I'm just asking the questions.
Yeah. So I actually audit a lot of websites on a regular basis that are not like our clients, because we look at competitors too. And I also help with the sales process and in helping businesses understand where their opportunities are to grow. So I'm going to probably walk through a lot of those types of things. And I would love to hear like anything Melissa has to say about content because that's her expertise, but I'm more of a I would say generalist in the way that I view sites. And when I audit, I'm looking at everything like, hey, first, is there even a strategy? If there is a strategy, where are there gaps in that strategy? And where are things that we could do to see improvements and how big are those gaps and what's happening on their site? I like to use detailed SEO extension to like see all the basic information because it's interesting the things that could be missed sometimes. I think this is okay for a homepage. The pages that we really focus on a lot are internal pages that are more likely to bring in leads because we are a local focus agency. Our goal is not just to bring in more traffic, but to bring in traffic that is more likely to convert. So someone's searching for services, someone's searching near me or based on a location or a city name, they're more likely to be someone who's going to convert and become a lead versus someone who comes in from a blog post, like how to get rid of rodents in your attic. That is very general and it can apply to anywhere. And it doesn't mean that you're going to get someone who's local to you. You could get essentially someone from another country from that type of search because that is not specific to your location. And that is one of the biggest differentiators I see in local SEO in general, is that your location, your content does need to be localized. It can't be generic. And if it is generic, you're not going to rank as well locally. And you may actually rank better nationally instead of locally if you do not localize your content. But I would love to hear Melissa's thoughts on like this first, I think this is the first location page I've pulled up for Baton Rouge.
Yeah, so you touched on localization of content for these types of businesses, and as we can see right here immediately on this page, they've tried to localize this content, but let's be realistic here. If you're looking for an exterminator in Baton Rouge, you don't need to know the history of Baton Rouge. That's irrelevant, right, to pest control. Now, if we can pull out statistics, you see these lists of common pests here, like which one of these are the most prevalent in a Baton Rouge home, and what suburb of Baton Rouge potentially even has issues with, they're closer to water. And forgive me for anyone from Louisiana. One of my good friends is from there, but I have no clue anything. So when I say things like rivers and lakes and stuff, just laugh at me in the background. But the idea is, if you can connect what you're doing to the local community and the pain points specifically, that's the type of localization you want, and not necessarily this history of Baton Rouge on the page. The way this page is laid out visually from a UX perspective too, there's a lot of gaps between the content. And, this is probably a padding issue with the CSS on the page, but it's taking us a lot of time to get to the meat of things. We got these reviews here, we've got great visuals, but at the top of the page above that fold, we're not really seeing anything super relevant to what this page is. And in theory, we all know as marketers, you see this page and you're like, oh, I know what this page is. But we have to assume that potential customers, readers don't necessarily know what the intent is and what the action is from there. So I would start with looking at what are the competitors doing that are ranking page one. What can we mimic? And then what can we do above and beyond that to make this page truly not just localized, but true to who we are as the business? And that's how you build that trust, so that when they get to this contact form, if they're not ready right here, boom, on this page, you've now convinced them to fill this contact form out, give them a call, and then you make that sale and turn that lead into cash in the bank.
I have a quick question, if that's okay. So on a page like this one, which great feedback on this page. What in both of your experience, as far as lead gen goes, on like a page with a lot of content for local or multi-location businesses, do we see a lot more success when we see those like local social proof like at the top of the page, where we're seeing like maybe they have their reviews at the bottom of the page, which I feel like that's really good stuff, right? Those are like people in your neighborhood and your city giving their experiences, kind of like popping that to the top. And then second question, so like that's one question. The second question here is, historically, I think a lot of SEOs or content marketers, we like thought that stuffing a page with words, like obviously makes it rank better. So if these aren't the words that are helpful to the user, what kind of content would you recommend if it did need more like depth to rank well? Okay, so I know those are two separate questions, but I would love both of your thoughts on either.
I could jump in on the kind of stuffing of words and things like that. So the first thing I did when the Google leaks came out was literally search through the docs, and Amanda was the first one I messaged, and who says, look, word count is not a thing. So there's a lot of reasons of why this happens. A lot of tools out there give you an average word count that a lot of people stick to. For years and years, the skyscraper technique has taught us to just try to put the same thing and a little bit more on pages. I think that's all BS. Ignore all of that. Okay, go tell your bosses. Melissa Popp said, ignore all of that. Here's what you want to do. So the first thing you need to understand is, why are you building this page to begin with? Okay, and this is what you craft the whole page around. Okay, and it's very simple to say, oh, I need a location page to rank here. I need a service page to rank here. But that's not the point. The point is converting those people that land on this page to trust you enough to do business with you. So you need to start with pain points. So if I was going to rebuild this page, okay, quick and dirty, the first thing I would do is bugs and pests are gross. They scare us. Why are we not tapping into that, the emotions there in this introduction, boom, top of page, to essentially elicit an emotional response, and then start going through what this company does, why they're good at it, and that social proof that we talked about of like, they know they're good because here are the reviews for it. So there's a lot of content on this page that's salvageable, that can be built upon. And I think a page layout and I am a very big fan of having that social proof, no matter where it's from, further at the top of a page for pages like this, because it's like, most people are not going to read a full location or service page. Realistically, they already know they have a pain point. They're just trying to find a business they can trust to do it. So that's the kind of content that you need at the top of the page. And sometimes that's 300 words if you're good. Sometimes it's 500 words. Sometimes, we've worked with clients in technological fields that we don't even understand what they're doing. So that might be a page that needs 1,000, 1,500 words. But don't worry about the word count. Worry about finding that pain point, explaining why you're the solution to it, and using that social proof to convince people to pick up the phone, fill out your form, whatever your lead generation setup is on a page. That's my quick and dirty of how to, boom, get these going.
Yeah, and one of the things that I would be concerned about just for this site in general, if this is a strategy used throughout the page, because like we're telling them that this page is about Baton Rouge exterminator, but all of the first content that they see when they go to the page has nothing to do with extermination. So that is confusing for site visitors and for search engines, because they're expecting to see content about what the page is essentially about, but they're getting this history instead. And the text about this history is I would say almost the majority of the text on this page. So it's 50% of the text on the page is not about their services at all, or about any social proof or anything that would lead to someone to contact them. And I agree with Melissa, a lot of this content that's further down the page should be up here. That would solve a lot of their issues. And just from like thinking about, okay, we have a social proof here, we have reasons why they would want to work with us, move those higher. Figuring out what are the types of pests that are most common in Baton Rouge, and putting that at the top too, and creating sections for each of those types of pests to make sure that we are ranking for those. They have some of those here, but I don't know for certain that these are the most common pests in Baton Rouge. I live in South Carolina, and we already have enough mosquitoes, so I'm certain that is one of them. But these other ones, I think is extremely important to make sure, like, hey, what are the opportunities that we need to focus on the most, and which ones are going to be the most competitive in Baton Rouge, so that we can make sure we set ourselves up for success for the topics that we want to make sure we rank for in the most competitive cities. Because in some cities, rodent control may be extremely easy to rank for. So we don't need to have a specific section or a page about it for that city, and understanding like what needs to be done in each market to perform well in each individual market. So that we can get the best rankings possible. It's not just going to be like, it's not always a rinse and repeat. We do the same thing for each market to get the results we want. Sometimes some markets require something a little bit different. And I think that's something we do really well, is that we customize our strategy based on what is actually needed, not on necessarily what is the easiest way to go about putting things up. And that may be the case here as well. I think those were great call outs that Melissa has. I'm going to look at this like pest control service. Let's see. I don't see anything too concerning or like off. Schema definitely needs to be looked at. There's definitely issues with their schema here. And if they're on WordPress, like, take the easy way out and just use like rank math to do most of it for you. And it looks like they have their organization schema on every page too, which it should only be essentially on the home page. And if you have individual locations on each of the location pages too, but specific to that location. So there's definitely opportunities in schema. And if schema has issues, there's likely other technical issues. So the site likely would need an entire site crawl and technical audit to determine what else may be going on here. I do see a lot of internal linking going to these individual pages. It looks like they do have specific pages for specific services, whether they're duplicate or not across multiple locations, I don't know. But I would love to hear Melissa's thoughts about duplicate content across service and location pages.
Oh, that's a whole other webinar too. Dear Lord. So this site, I did run this site through SiteLiner, just a quick spot check, and I didn't see any crazy wild issues or anything like that. But that is a huge pain point. Amanda will tell you how many times I bang my head against the desk when we onboard a new client and discover that all the location or service pages or a combination of them are duplicate across the board. You know, realistically, that tactic worked, 10 years ago. And unfortunately, it still works in some ways today when there's not a lot of other competitive content in the local niche that your client might be working in. This is one of those areas that it's better to just not create content than to create duplicate content in that case. And if your website is absolutely being created that way, you got to rewrite it. You got to make it unique. You got to take the time and spend the budget on doing that. To kind of circle back to talking about the helpful content update, we know that Google looks at pages individually. We also know that they look at quality issues site-wide, and they're trying to narrow down being able to separate those two so that sites, have a fair shot in search results. I would encourage you take the time. A lot of content seems a lot harder to create. Location and service pages are often easier to write and research than blog posts. Just don't do duplicate content, folks.
Just say no.
Just say no. We're gonna restart that campaign.
Yeah. One other thing that I thought about is that there's no subfolder for locations. They're just off the root. That may be a good thing to add, because then it makes it easier for you to analyze data and see how your location pages are performing in comparison to others. You could use the dash LA for Louisiana at the end to segment them, but having a clear strategy, because one of the things that we see happen a lot with our multi-location clients is that they are looking to grow. They don't plan to be in the same market forever. They're thinking about moving into other cities or other states. And right now, this isn't really set up to encourage that or support that in the future. So it would be a great idea, especially if you know your client is considering that or wants to do that, to build your site in a way where you can support multiple locations, multiple states, and even possibly multiple countries, depending on what your clients' long-term goals are. And you can definitely be a part of that. That's also extremely important for your SEO strategy too, is to think strategically about the long-term health and goals of your client, not just about what's going to help you rank for Baton Rouge today, but what is going to help you rank in Baton Rouge, but also set you up for success in the future for any future locations or future services as well. So having that be part of your content strategy, your information architecture, layout of your site, the internal linking of your site, all of those things working together sets you up for more success in the future. And I encourage SEOs just to think about that anyway. Work for your client like you're expecting for them to continue to work for you 5 to 10 years from now, and what you think would be best for the growth of that company, not just about what gets you the quick win today.
That's really good advice. That is really good advice. Okay. So we have 3 different great questions that came in. And let's go through those before we move on to the next site.
Okay.
But okay, so Muskan, and I apologize if I pronounce your name incorrectly, but they ask, how can you, oh, I was about to read that and then another question popped up. Okay. How can you make all location pages different in terms of content? We'll end up writing some of the same services and structure, and how can we define the uniqueness of those pages, or even, Melissa, localized content pieces? How do you make sure that they're not duplicate content or cannibalizing each other?
Definitely. And like, let's be realistic here. When you're especially a multi-location business, or your business is in a lot of singular local markets in, like, let's say one state, realistically, there's going to be content that absolutely, in theory, is going to be the same across the board, that you can spin, you can rewrite, you can make unique, literally sentence by sentence. This is service descriptions. In the case of this business, talking about the different pests, things like that. That's realistic. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and say, oh yeah, you can make that magically unique. You can't. This is where working on your introduction, your conclusion, your call to actions, bringing in social proof, bringing in even discussions and questions that your service techs, your customer service people have that are unique to those locations. There are ways to weave in that storytelling aspect of what a service or location might be to make the bulk of the content on the page unique. And one of the things that Amanda talked about was, when we looked at the introduction to this Baton Rouge page, you look at that content was 50% of the page. Right now, we know there's no indicator of you need to have X amount of unique content on a page. So the idea is to have enough unique content that is localized, that is telling that story, versus the content that we could call it placeholder content to make it easier. So you're not going to be able to 100% make these pages in a lot of cases, especially at scale. So let's say you're building 25, 30 location pages. Your eyes are going to be bleeding trying to do that. So it's finding ways to bring in unique perspectives. Another thing you can do is interview people, your customer service people. What are the most common questions, and build FAQs specific to that location. In this case, perhaps there's an area in Louisiana that takes a much longer for these pest control folks to get out to. That could be a question that's unique to that location that you add to that page. It does take some more planning and research to be able to find these nuggets, but this is how you not only make these pages more unique when you're dealing with these issues, but this is also showing that you care enough about that community and that location. That's another trust point for someone who wants to do business with you. So it's not easy. Okay. It really isn't. But this is where the work we do up front on the research side benefits our writers, who are able to do this and then take our research and make all those words pretty for us to make those pages unique, and then scale that.
If I may just chime in, I actually have a question that's somewhat related to, the uniqueness of content. And I know we're looking at Baton Rouge. I don't know that neighborhood that well, so I'll ask it in the Denver metro sense, right? You have neighborhoods like Aurora or South Denver, or like Cherry Creek or Lakewood. At what point does a location page for something like Union Station or Lakewood make sense? Because if we're talking about this whole, yes, we need to add a story, the content needs to be up to snuff, all of a sudden tackling every single granular neighborhood gets expensive, tricky, hard to maintain. So where do you cut the line? And if you hover over Amanda, Jordan, their locations, I noticed that they have a lot of little, yeah, like these, right? Like Bouette is when I Google Maps Bouette, it's this really small suburb of or neighborhood looking thing on Google Maps. How granular is too granular here?
Yeah, I would say that's too granular. A lot of the times, I'm the one with my clients who works with franchises, who goes back and says we don't need one for this city. We do need one for this city, and it's based on population. It's based on search volume. I like to use Keyword Planner from Google Ads to understand what the local market is like, because there are going to be cases, and we see this actually a lot, where businesses have pages for cities that aren't really even cities. Their population is too small. There aren't a ton of leads to even get in that area. And they may even be able to rank there still if it's important to them by just mentioning it on a larger page for a larger city that it's near in proximity. So it's not always necessary, and it's not necessary to have one for each city. The way that I look at it is my kind of checklist for understanding if I need to have a page or not is Is there enough of search volume in that area in comparison to cities where I actually have a physical location for it to be worth the effort of creating new content for it? Do I actually have enough competition in this area that it warrants a page? And is that competition actually doing SEO in the first place? Or are they just ranking there because they're lucky and no one else is even trying? Because that is often the case. It's just like no one else is doing it. They're the only ones that even mentioned that city one time on their website. And that is why they rank there. And there's no need to create an entire page for that city. And that is the case for individual service pages for locations too. So if you were thinking about like, does Baton Rouge need a termite page? Well, what is the search volume like for termite services in Baton Rouge? Is it competitive? Are those competitors actually doing SEO, or are they getting lucky? Like, oh, those are the questions I ask myself for individual services for a specific location as well.
So you're saying that gone are the days of pest control in 94101, pest control in 94102.
Yeah, please don't do that. I mean, if you're a competitor competing with one of my clients, please do it. But otherwise, please do not do it.
And one more thing to add to that, you know, I think, you know, there's a lot of hate on Google right now. There's a lot there. We have the antitrust lawsuits. We have a lot of just hate in general toward it. I think Google, when it comes to understanding search intent and location intent, also we see that they understand sometimes when you start getting into neighborhoods and suburbs and the crossover effects. So Bernard, you mentioned, you know, talking about Aurora and Lakewood and things like that. I see that all the time where Lakewood and Denver, because Denver is such a huge city that then gets broken down into its suburbs. Lakewood is neighboring city. I see that all the time during hail season in here for roofing clients, is that when a hailstorm hits and people start searching, the crossover between the two, it's like they're one giant city of their own. And so I think Google is getting a lot smarter at being able to understand that. And when you search something as broad as Denver, especially, you know, you're logged into your Google account, so it's pinging your actual location. You know, it also is figuring that out. And I think that's to tie into what Amanda was saying, is like this is the type of research too that you have to look at. You look in Keyword Planner, do searches yourself, use your location changer and understand what is Google serving, and also think of how to build to serve to that. And then, you know, check in on that and update your strategy accordingly.
Okay, good stuff, y'all. Okay, another quick question before we move to the next site. So I have a client that has services in 3 different states. We build 3 different websites under one domain. I don't feel confident in them. Like the main website works well, all the service pages work, but I don't feel like this is a sustainable idea. What are your thoughts? And if it does backfire, what can this person do for backup?
I'm guessing they mean like there are 3 different sites. Are they like using like a subdomain instead of subfolders? I mean, if they're using subdomains, the answer is please don't do that. That would be something where I would change to using subfolders instead, because Google treats every subdomain as a separate website. So any backlinks you have for domain.com do not apply for new.domain.com. So you need to, like, it's better for your site and your ability to rank in all these different markets for them to be housed under the same domain. As far as like, if the question is like, we have like locational, like geographical sections on our site that's different for each state. That can be an it depends thing, depending on your market, depending on your competitors. Especially if you're in a highly competitive industry. Like I work with a lot of clients who are personal injury lawyers, where like, yeah, you do need to differentiate yourself for every market because it's so highly competitive that you can't get by with having one car accident page that's supposed to rank for every city in every state you're located in. It's just not going to happen. So there's a lot of different factors that would go into that. And I would encourage that person, like if they want to talk about this more feel free to reach out to me if they want to talk about that specific site and that specific situation, because I'd love to just like chat, get a better understanding of it, and see if there's any advice I can give that's more specific to that.
Well, that's super kind of you. Okay, we have a lot of questions, but I do want to get to this other site that was submitted that you guys prepped. So let's jump to that. And if we do not get to your question today, Amanda and Melissa have like told me ahead of time, they've been so generous, like connect them on socials, like, and we'll pass your questions along to them. And then whatever Bernard and I can answer, we can also send out in the like roundup tomorrow. So let's move on to this next site and jump in. And then again, if we don't get to your questions, I promise we will do it somehow. Okay.
I mean, honestly, just being straight up honest, I already dislike this. It is a barrier to entry for like site crawlers and people. I would not recommend having this show up before you can get to the website. There are so many different ways that you could do that instead. That would be much easier. You can have like a tool that like uses their IP address to determine where they are and then chooses a location for them. But I honestly prefer just to have a very good location page where someone comes into that page if they search for certain services or whatever, and they're in that city, because it ranks well for those keywords, for near me and city specific keywords. Because when Google crawls your website, they are crawling from a server in a specific location, and you do not get to choose where they're crawling from. So if you're already deciding for someone where they're going to be located, then they may miss content for other parts of your website because it's only specific to that city. So there's like a risk in getting too focused on automatically serving a specific geography based on someone's IP address. And when I think that's part of the reason why they did that, to get around it, but that also makes it more difficult potentially to crawl your site. And it also makes the user experience not as user friendly, not as nice. So I would definitely be looking for a different way to help people get to their preferred location, other than having that pop-up come up as soon as they get to the website.
Yeah, and to add on to that, also in Chrome, for me this morning when I looked at this site, not only did that pop-up show up, but Chrome was also asking for my location to use that as well. And that actually did nothing. It didn't move me anywhere. So you immediately have those two barriers of entry to people. It's almost like going to a tobacco or an alcohol website, and immediately it's, how old are you? So they know you can be in the site. But both of those things popping up add to that barrier of entry.
Yeah, there's some interesting things going on here. Like, so this Calgary North page has a canonical for the homepage. So we're essentially telling Google, hey, yeah, this URL exists, but we prefer for you to reference this page instead. So, and it could, depending, Google can ignore this. They can decide, now we're going to serve this URL that you actually gave us instead. But if it's not ignoring it, then this page probably isn't ranking well in Calgary, because they're telling Google to ignore that it exists and to look at the homepage instead. So this page itself, if someone was searching for their services or products in Calgary, or like flooring in Calgary, they're less likely to actually land on this website than they would be for someone who dedicated a page to Calgary and people can actually get to that page specifically. I do think this is something that they can solve by, yeah, like they have location pages. I do think this is something that they could solve by building out these location pages, and making them more user-friendly, so that they can, one, rank and then be used as a page where someone comes in on the site and then they can use it to find other elements that they're looking for or specific products that they're looking for. They're also not utilizing page titles in a way where they can add like keywords that can help them rank for specific things that people are looking for, or even like flooring company, flooring store. We do see this a lot. Not every page needs to be focused on your brand in a page title. that can actually be detrimental depending on how competitive your industry is. We often find that the more competitive your industry is, the more you benefit from having 2 keywords there or variations of your most important keywords over having your business name here, just because it's like someone puts end of the role in a search bar and they're in Canada, they're going to get you. Like there's no question on whether they're going to get to your site or not. So it's kind of like not a great use of that real estate that Google uses to understand who's trying to get to your site. Where is the H1? It says there's an H1, but it's not. Here it is, Calgary North. Another missed opportunity to include some type of common term for people who are looking for flooring companies in that area. It just says Calgary North. This is supposed to tell search engines and users what the page is about, but what about Calgary North? Is it about that area? Is it about what specifically about this area is this page about? And it's not giving that information currently. So it limits the usefulness for helping people get to that page. Anything you want to add, Melissa, about how this homepage is set up or about their location page?
Yeah, so I agree with everything Amanda said so far about, the way this is set up and structured isn't really conducive to guiding people to where they need to be. My biggest concern on the content side is there is more information about who end of the role is on those store detail location pages than there are on the primary kind of slug here that people are going to. So I would actually even potentially consider it's like one or the other, combining the two. And because right now, if this is your homepage for Calgary North or any of the other locations, we'll call it the homepage for that, right? There is nothing on here who tells me who you are. I can tell what you do, but there's no real social proof. There's no addressing of pain points. Even the blog posts that are showing up on this page are more bottom of the funnel than they are necessarily pain points. Some of them are middle of the funnel, but there's nothing really here to convince me that I should choose this company over any of the competitors for that. The page layout is good. There's good information here, but I'm very much concerned that this is the wrong information to try to convince someone to click further into the site, because it doesn't really tell me who you are. And unless you're a company like an Amazon, where I say the name Amazon right now, and every single person on this call knows exactly who I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the rainforest, right? Unless a brand is that powerful, you have to tell people who you are, what you do, why you're good at it, all of that social proof to convince them to start clicking through to where you need them to go to make that sale or generate a lead.
That is really great feedback. We do have a question that came in from the person who submitted the site. So when someone searches flooring Ottawa, their pages don't show up until page 5. When someone searches flooring Ottawa East, the site ranks between 1 and 3 on the first page. So what they did is they decided to create a location page that would be just Ottawa, that would let the user choose which location they want to visit, but Google refuses to index it. So we keep asking Google to crawl the site, but it just won't, and the developer is at a loss, and they're wondering any idea why. And so I'm wondering, I don't have as much experience as you both in this area, but I'm wondering if that's related to that canonical.
I actually have some thoughts too. Go ahead, Amanda. I'll let you jump in. I found this issue while I was looking at the site before.
It's likely related to the canonical issue, but it's also likely related to the things that Melissa mentioned related to the content earlier. There's really not anything that helps it surface specifically in one area over the other. Ottawa East likely doesn't have as much competition than Ottawa in general. So it's likely why they're ranking better there. It's not necessarily something that they're doing from an SEO perspective that's helping them. It's just that it's not as competitive, so it's easier to perform better there. But they should be, by fixing a lot of the issues that we've seen, it should help them rank in Ottawa in general if they address things like the canonicalization of the homepage for each of these locations. If they make more location-specific content so that they can actually perform in those markets, I think both of those things would help. I'm also curious to understand what the internal linking looks like on this website, because I am under the impression that that likely has some concerns as well. And that's why they're not performing well. I didn't look at the schema and to see if they're actively using it on these pages. It says web page. Yeah, they're not utilizing schema to include like the address and location information for individual locations either. So that's likely another opportunity to improve as well. And I would, unless there's like a specific reason to like business reason, as in there is a Ottawa East location that's called that and an Ottawa West location that's called that, I would not include, or if that's like a common way that people speak about the areas in Ottawa, I would not include that. I see a lot of franchises will arbitrarily add like north, south, east, west, but that's not something that Google understands as a like regional thing for that area, and it's not something that people actually use. It's just based off of how their territories are set up, or how well, that's usually what it is. It's how their territories are set up. But that's not how people search. Is not doing you any favors, especially if you have people, two different franchisees in the same city, and you're doing east and west just to differentiate it. What's going to work the best is just proximity to the searcher. Whichever location they're closest to is the one that has a better chance of ranking anyway. So that's not really much of a factor, other than like you go into different people a part of the same area to kind of battle it out over to determine who's gonna get more of the leads from that area. That can be really difficult, and is most of the time it does not work out well. So unless Ottawa West and East are terms that are often used there by users, and it's like something that's geographically relevant in the eyes of search engines too, it's likely not helping to have that type of differentiation. And we've seen clients do other types of differentiation too. So they might use the street name if they have two locations in the same city, because that's sometimes a better way to do it. If east and west are directional differences aren't something that people actually use in that area. And sending it over to you, Melissa, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, so I see Veronica give us a little bit more details in the chat as well of talking about how these are two different stores, which also have different products available. So one of my concerns when I was looking at this is I actually saw this indexing issue when I was playing around and doing site searches. It almost looks like everything for Ottawa East, all of the product pages as well, are not indexed. And without being able to see access to Google Search Console and see those discovered crawled not indexed reports, I can't 100% for sure tell you each ones that aren't. But my big concern with sites like this, any sort of site that has a category product set up like this, is that, when you're building out those pages, that is the same content across the board. Your descriptions are usually going to be the same. For the most case, the products may be the same, with some offered, some not. But you have a lot of content that technically is duplicate, even though we've seen Google in the past talk about product descriptions and understanding that when you pull them from manufacturers' websites, that's okay use. They understand that. But when you start building at scale like this, where you have multiple locations, and thanks Amanda for showcasing that and kind of showing some of that, you've built out a great site. Visually, it looks good. We obviously have room for improvement, but if we can't even get these pages indexed, then we not only need to look at the technical side of things, we need to look at how these pages are set up, what unique content could be put on them. And that's a huge project. Don't get me wrong. Like, this isn't going to be something you can do overnight, but this goes back to how the information architecture is set up for the website, what your targeting is going to be. And then, as Amanda was talking about, some of those canonicalization issues, we do know Google will ignore that. Sometimes they'll set their own, which you can see that report in Google Search Console. I would really dive in that, because if you're seeing these issues throughout the site, we're talking site structure issue before we even get into the nitty gritty of what's literally on the page. But I would be very concerned if this site came across my desk and someone asked me to look into it with these technical issues, because if you, let's say, open another location in the future and duplicating this strategy, the same thing is most likely going to happen, where you're going to see the canonicalization issues, but then you're also going to see that Google is no longer going to index that content, even though it's relevant content and there's not anything base level wrong there.
Gotcha. Okie doke. So we have 5 more minutes. Bernard, any like thoughts or questions on that before I jump into, there was one submitted question about internal linking, which I think is really important to address. But Bernard, any thoughts before I jump into that
No,
question?
not that. You should go ahead and ask the question. I just also, I know most of this has been content teardown, analyzing the content, but I do want to, at least surface up, the off-page factors as well, Google My Business, velocity of reviews, count of reviews, citations from, Yelp, Yellow Pages, that kind of stuff. And so anyways, let's continue with the content teardown, but maybe a brief segue into off-page factors could be helpful for the audience.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. Okay, very quick question. So I was wondering about building an internal linking strategy for multi-location sites. Is it okay to mix locations for internal linking on the same blog? Let's say it's a legal client and I want to add both a Los Angeles personal injury link at the beginning and an Orange County personal injury link towards the end. I know it might read a bit spammy, so I was wondering about your thoughts on that. If not, how would you recommend going about it?
So Melissa and I actually have worked together to create like a content strategy specifically for multi-location businesses so that they can build internal links. And it's to build locally relevant topical blog posts. Like, they are actually locally relevant. They are about that specific area. And we use those to provide internal linking opportunities to those key location pages and location service pages. My first question would be, is the Orange County page serving you well now? Because are people searching more for Los Angeles or Orange County when they're looking up car accident, personal injury, lawyer terms? And the first thing I would do is look at maybe your Google Ads data, and look at your Google Analytics data to see where people are coming in at and where they're converting from. Because you may find that Orange County isn't serving you as well. It really depends on how people search in that specific area, whether they're doing one or the other, because there are some places where people search on the county level and some where they search on the city level. You can link to multiple pages from one blog post. That's not an issue. And by the way, also adding multiple internal links to the same pages does not do anything for you. So you don't need to do it more than once. It won't make a difference to Google if you've done it one time versus 15 times. But I would look into like, what is your intention, and if that's an actual good internal linking strategy for people who are visiting the page. So that would be my first question. Like, does it make sense to link to both on that page? Is it better to link to one or the other on that page? Are you talking about Los Angeles as a city versus a county? Because that would also change things too. If they're both county pages, then sure. But I also would think that you likely need a city specific page for both of those, and to build out a strategy for county specific content for each of the counties, with blogs to create an internal linking strategy where it's specific to that county and you can link to those pages. You can find opportunities, like if you have a car accident page that's just a generic car accident page, and you want to link to your, like, a California car accident page, and you want to link to your Orange County, your Los Angeles County pages, that's totally fine and a legitimate way to build some internal links as well.
Cool. Okay, so we are right at like 1 o'clock. So high level, if you want to give some input on like page SEO, like real quick, and then like just like spitfire. And then if you want to give like your top thing that you would recommend people take away from this session that are doing multi-location SEO. So those two things, rapid fire before everyone has to drop their next
Here we
meeting.
go. Good links, good reviews, good, and always take the time to build quality pages. Otherwise, it's a waste of your time.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. Like, don't worry about the domain authority as much as you worry about topical and local relevance. Those are going to be more key for your off-site SEO. GBP optimization, make sure you have every section of it as full as you can and completely complete it as much as possible. My biggest takeaway is to think more about the overall strategy of why you're doing something and how you're doing it and how it plays into the potential growth of a business instead of just focusing on quick wins in SEO.
That's good stuff. Well, everyone should be following both of you because I know you both share knowledge there. And obviously, if you're still with us by the end of this call, you can tell that they're experts. So you should be listening to them, right? So go ahead and follow them. And Amanda and Melissa, we are so grateful for you joining us, sharing your knowledge and your time with us. I mean, I got so much out of this session and it was very educational for me. And we're just, grateful for your generosity. Everyone connect with them. And if you have a question that wasn't answered here today, because I know we had so many good questions, we will try to get back with you, or feel free to connect with Amanda and Melissa directly on LinkedIn or Twitter/X. So yeah. Thank you all for your time today. Thanks for joining us. And Amanda and Melissa, we loved hearing from you, and we hope we can have you back in the future sometime.
We'd love to. Thanks for having us, everybody.
Thank you for having us.